Welcome everyone to Close Reading Poetry. My name is Adam Walker, and today we are reading John Milton's Sonnet 19, sometimes called the Sonnet on His Blindness. Other times it's simply called When I Consider How My Light is Spent. A lot of you have been interested in John Milton. I haven't done a lot of John Milton on here, but at the end of this video, stick around and I'll tell you about an opportunity to study John Milton with me. But today we are reading one of his shorter poems on his blindness. This is his most famous sonnet, and there's good reason for it. It's a sonnet of really great emotional intensity, and it's a poem that artfully crafted. In fact, the structure of it relies upon readers' understanding of an Italian sonnet. It's essentially a poem about disability, how to go on living after a major change in life has occurred. In this instance, the disability is blindness, but it just might as well be something like old age. And so this poem has resonated with people throughout the ages. John Milton was of middle age when he began to lose his eyesight. For context, this was very, very traumatic. It was a huge loss to Milton. He had grown up with upper-class Puritan ideals. The Puritan ideal really valued work. Essentially, within the theology of Milton's English Calvinism, you were saved by grace, but you proved that you were saved by grace by your works, by your good works, and by your activity. And so Milton, who was really so self-disciplined, so productive, he would spend hours in the library reading as a young man and as a student, sometimes staying awake, reading and studying classical authors, the English poets, until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Then he'd of course be up for prayers very early the next day. And so he was extremely studious. And John Milton attributes his blindness to those many hours he spent reading by candlelight. So work was extremely important to him as a poet. He believed from a very young age that he was going to be a great poet, and you need to see to be a poet. And so with the loss of this eyesight, he feels the loss of his purpose, his mission in life. As of yet, John Milton has not written Paradise Lost. That he will actually dictate to his daughters and secretaries, and they would write it down as he orally composed it, having lost his eyesight. But this is before that. This is before he's come to write the great epic, Paradise Lost. So that's a little context here. This is a strange sonnet structurally because, as I said, it relies upon the Italian structure of the Petrarchan sonnet, where you have an octet of 8 lines, the first 8 lines. Then you have a sestet, the last 6 lines. Now, right at the beginning of the sestet, at the 9th line, you would have what was called the Volta, a great shift. Sometimes this Volta would be signaled by a conjunction like but, or sometimes therefore, making a logical turn. Right at the 9th line, readers of the sonnet, of the Italian sonnet especially, were waiting for that turn. And the volta, or the turn in this sonnet, which is organized just like the Italian sonnet, you'll notice the rhyme scheme is set with the 8 lines and the 6. That volta is in an odd place. So he's relying upon your and my remembrance of that structure, familiarity with that Petrarchan structure. So, here's the sonnet. When I consider how my light is spent, ere half my days in this dark world and wide, in that one talent which is death to hide, lodged in me, useless, though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker, and present my true account, lest he turning chide. Doth God exact day labor, light denied? I fondly ask. Let's untangle the sense here before we get to the ends. So here's the Italian sonnet octet. The sounds are connected. We have the int, we'll call that A, the A rhyme, wide, B, hide, B, bent. There we have A, present, another A, B, B, A, and this comprises the octet. So he's referring to his blindness in this first line. His light is spent before half his days on this earth are over. This dark world and wide. Notice that rhythm. If you were to read this and then try to reconstruct it from memory, you might be tempted to reconstruct this line as in this dark and wide world, placing the adjectival modifier here before world, as we normally would do. But that would disrupt the iambic rhythm and also just the consonant interplay that's going on with the D's and the W's in this poem, in this dark world and wide. There's something different about saying dark world and then almost as an afterthought and wide. And it's like the sonnet is thinking itself into utterance. And here we have a biblical allusion in that one talent which is deaf to hide, lodged in me useless. I've spoken before in Samuel Johnson's poem on the death of Dr. Robert Levitt, the significance of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, the story of the talent, where the parable of the Lord who gives talents to his servants, and two of them are very productive with it. They buy, they sell, they increase. They were very diligent at working. There again, this very Protestant, Puritan interest in producing works. But the third person, the third servant, hid that talent, which was a form of money, hid it in the ground. So when his Lord returned, he had nothing else to show for but that one talent. And so Milton here is feeling as though the one gift that God has given him, his sight and really his ability to write and to study, has been taken away. And so when he's brought to account before Christ what he did with his talents, he won't have anything to show for it because his light is spent, lodged in me useless. Though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker. Interesting enjambment here. The poem is enacting in a way that bent by causing the suspense of an incomplete unit of sense here. My soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker. So he wants to serve his Maker with that talent, but it's lodged useless. He doesn't have it anymore. And he wants to, and present my true account, lest he, returning, chide. Chide means to punish or to complain against or to correct. And here we have the completion of a period. We've got the semicolon. And then we get this question. And here are these D's coming home to rest. We've had a lot of D's here, and the W's, and the long I's. Here it is. Doth God exact day labor, light denied? Next line, I fondly ask. And that fondly ask, fondly or foolishly or lightheartedly, I ask. This is giving us time, really, and space to process the weight of this question. Will God demand labor if he doesn't supply the light to work? He fondly asks. This is the major question here. Notice that this is the octet. So we're at line 8 here. And look what happens. But patience. To prevent that murmur, now we're suddenly in the sestet. What's strange about that? Because what's strange about it is that usually the Volta comes here. Usually. But it's not there. It's in the middle of the 8th line, which is not where the Volta traditionally is. Why? Well, what's going on here? We look at the language, you observe the words. But patience, to prevent. What does prevent mean? It comes from the Latin venio, which is to come, which is to come before, so to arrive before a certain time, or to intercept. That's exactly what the Volta is doing. It's coming before we expect it to. So patience, just like patience, is coming to prevent that murmur or complaint, key word in the book of Exodus, when the nation of Israel is wandering through the wilderness and they're punished for murmuring against God or complaining. So this is the complaint, all relying, interestingly, on Old and New Testament scriptures. but patience to prevent that murmur soon replies. This is so interesting because John Milton, who really is the poet of extension, of syntactical extension, where the grammatical structures just simply seem to overflow as they will in Paradise Lost, in blank verse, here in the sonnet itself. The key structures of the sonnets are entangled within this syntactical extension. But patience says what to this complaint? Will God exact works from me when I have no means to work? Patience says, coming before, preventing that murmur, which actually gets spoken, soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly. Thousands at his bidding speed, and post o'er land and ocean without rest. Reference, perhaps, to the Old Testament minor prophet Zechariah, where you have the bay horses going out and coming back in, going all over the land. So it's the very Puritan idea of the sovereignty of God. So it's interesting that the Puritan demand and dilemma for works, for fruit, and for activity is assuaged and resolved by the Puritan doctrine of God in his sovereignty, that God is not reliant upon human works, but he can accomplish his plan in other ways. And so Milton, in a way, is saying, in God's sovereignty, God loses nothing by losing my sight. And so in the grand scheme of things, heaven is uninjured. Okay, but how does that resolve his dilemma? Will he still be exacted day labor while he's blind? Here's how the poem resolves with that last bit. Post o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. So it's interesting that according to biblical precedents of what's going on in heaven and what the throne room is described as in Isaiah 6 and in other places, there are figures who just stand and wait, and standing and waiting is a certain form of service in itself, Milton has come to see. Now you'll see how the poem, as a sonnet, as an utterance of the soul, a murmur of a problem, will resolve itself in its thinking, and that's often what a sonnet will do. Present a problem in the 8 lines, the first 8 lines, and then present a new idea, sometimes a resolution to that problem. And so it's very important to come to poems not as, okay, what is the message that the poem's saying? What matters more is how the poem is saying it. You know, if this were a paragraph or a sermon, it would be written completely different, but it's not. These are roles offered to readers, and our own voices are, in a way, provoked into utterance by poems like this. We will lose faculties that we rely on. We will have changes in life that change us forever, and we must renegotiate our understanding of meaning and relation in the world. And that subtle negotiation, which is so oftentimes imperceptible, inexplicable, and unable to be articulated, finds perfect articulation in a poem like this. You see how the soul began in one posture of distress, and by the end of the poem, just a slight change, just by speaking, just by working it out, and that posture is resituated, and the relation between God and the soul is renegotiated and understood in a new way. And so the sonnet itself is almost enacting this spiritual illumination, this very almost imperceptible spiritual growth. Because I think a lot of people have these kinds of growths in different ways, whether they're spiritually understood or it's understood as a relation to other people in the world. You know, as changes happen, as you acquire new knowledge, such negotiations take place in life. And you're not quite the same. Now, I mentioned I have an opportunity for those who are interested in Paradise Lost. I've been getting requests for content on Paradise Lost. So in the spring, 2024, in February, I'm going to be hosting a class called Slow Reading Paradise Lost, where we're going to be spending 13 weeks reading through Paradise Lost. And we're going to be meeting once a week. We're also going to be thinking about this poem together. We're going to read it in enough time that we can really reading a book a week, and then we're going to come together. I'll give a small presentation of 30 to 40 minutes, which will be recorded. For those who can attend in person, after the lecture, there will be questions and answers, and there's also going to be conversation about select passages, key passages in this book. And so for those who will be interested in taking that, you can find more information on antrimliteratureproject.org. That's where I'll be hosting this course. So if you're interested in learning more about John Milton, or perhaps even reading John Milton's Paradise Lost for the first time, this would be a good place to do it, where we'll be encountering it with close reading, slow reading, community, and conversation over the course of a semester. So be on the lookout for that. I'll be sending a video out on that shortly with more information. Thanks, everyone, and until next time.